Hello, everyone. Thanks for coming out. I'm Sean Dubervac. Welcome to CES 2015. We're here with Andrew Keen, author of the just now released The Internet is Not the Answer. Most of you recognize the name Andrew Keen if you don't know the person. He's a well-known commentator on internet culture and the future of the internet. So, Andrew, thank you for coming out here.
Well, thank you.
So, why is the internet not the answer?
Well, you haven't asked me what the question is. Can you hear me? You haven't asked me what the question is yet.
Well, that's a very good point. So, where, and maybe the question is better, where is the internet not the answer, and where do you think it is that does that broadly apply to everything, that the internet broadly isn't the answer? Are there certain ways? Maybe you can talk a little bit about the title and just tell us what your premise is.
Yeah, I mean, the title is obviously designed to be a catching title. Again, it's designed to capture people's attention, so it's an interesting title. We struggled. The original title of the book, when I first sold the book, was Epic Fail. I wanted to call it Epic Fucking Fail, but publishers wouldn't let me do that one. So we originally called it Epic Fail, which was about the failure of the internet, or the failure of the web internet over the last 25 or 50 years to deliver on what it promised. And then my publisher didn't like that because he didn't think it was specific enough. So my publisher and agent were arguing on the phone about the title, and the publisher said, well, the internet's not the answer. And then there was this silence, and they said, oh, that's a good title. So they came up with the title. I like the title. I think it raises some interesting questions. In a very concrete way, I would say the internet at the moment, and I say this very carefully, at the moment, because I don't think that we can predict the future, and I certainly don't think the internet in the long term, I hope the internet isn't a complete failure, which I think at the moment it mostly is. That doesn't mean you can't use the internet, doesn't mean all these devices aren't relevant and all the rest of it. But at the moment, I don't think the internet's working as an operating system for 21st century life. I like that term, operating system. We all know what it means. But when I use the term operating system, I mean it in a more of a cultural, a social, and economic sense. At the moment, I think it's lending, as an operating system for the 21st century, the internet is lending itself, and I get into a lot of detail in this book, it's lending itself to massive monopolies which historically we've never even seen before, monopolies like Google in particular, which make Microsoft seem almost like a tiddler company. It's lending itself to problematic business models, in particular the business model of free, which has created a culture, a network of surveillance of most social media companies where you get stuff for free, we ourselves get turned into the product. And I think most importantly, in terms of the way I wrote this book, most of us, and I'm speaking on behalf, I think, of most of people here, most people are not comfortable with two major trends in the world today. The first is the increasing inequality between incredibly wealthy people and everybody else. And the second is the crisis of jobs, of employment. Even in our current economic environment where things are clearly getting better, they're mostly only getting better for the wealthy, and they're not really creating jobs. And in my book, The Internet is Not the Answer, I make the argument that while we can't blame the internet for the crisis of jobs, we can't blame the internet for the increasing inequality between the mega wealthy and everybody else, the internet has played an important role both as a cause and an effect in the disappearance of the middle class, the middle sector of cultural producers. And I think that that is the fundamental issue and challenge and question, and the reason why I wrote a book called The Internet is Not the Answer.
So what about web platforms like Etsy or eBay or even the Amazon Marketplace, which empower smaller players to be participants in this broader economic value chain?
Well, there may be an answer there, but let's use the example of YouTube. Now, YouTube says that it's the platform to enable video producers. And in a sense, YouTube should confirm all the idealism about the internet, that the internet enables everyone to be a video producer. I just moderated an event upstairs about the future of video. So in a sense, the technology of YouTube does empower. We can all go on YouTube. You can there's a guy at the back taking a video. He can take a few videos and then just upload it on YouTube. Anyone can do that. Doesn't cost anything. But there's a couple of problems with that. Firstly, these models, maybe not so much Etsy or Amazon, but these models are not generating revenue for the creative class. And secondly, they're the new monopolists. So YouTube takes 30% or 40% of the revenue from video producers. So the new platforms, which are supposed to be empowering, are as much the problem as the answer. Now, Etsy, I think, has more possibilities. But when you think, I mean, you think of Uber is a platform, is a new transportation platform. So now with Uber, anyone can be a cab driver. You don't have to pass any tests. They'll even lend you the money to buy a car. But what this is doing is creating a new monster in every sense called Uber, which is valued at $40 billion, and gives the power to the platform. Platforms aren't always bad, but I have a feeling and a deep concern, I write about it in detail in the book, that the platforms are the new monopolists. So whilst they do empower in a sense, and maybe one like Etsy offers a great deal of opportunity, they also lend themselves to these new monopolies.
So isn't this a common story with technology, though, that we constantly see disruption and change, and then new technological solutions come about to solve these externalities that are created by the innovation itself? So, you know, I gave the example when I was talking about my book about how we had an explosion of websites, so you started to see the rise of sites like Google to help move you through this explosion of websites. And then when that also became ineffective, you started to see the rise of sites like Reddit to take advantage of and curate a more user-generated experience as you started to try to move past the noise, right? Ultimately, you're trying to find the signal in the noise. So might we expect new technological solutions to come about to solve some of the externalities that are created by the things that you talk about in the book?
Well, I often get this question when it's happened before. And in my book, the book is quite historical. It compares what's going on now with the digital revolution with the industrial revolution at the beginning of the 19th century. And often people say to me, oh, well, this happened in the industrial revolution. Why are you worrying? Things worked out in the end. Technology always solves itself. Technology always comes up with solutions to its own problems. But that's not actually true. When you look at the Industrial Revolution, it required political and legislative solutions. So if it hadn't been for politicians and legislators, we'd still have kids working in factories. We'd still have terrible industrial smog. So I don't think technology or even the market solves these issues. If they did, then I wouldn't need to write the book. And if they did, you know, Microsoft needed to be challenged as a monopolist. This enabled Google. Just as today, the next Google might not be enabled because of these new monopolists. So I don't think technology is always the solution. I think, especially at an event like this, we tend to be positive about technology. We tend to believe in it, but it doesn't always work out that way.
So what is the answer then? Is it regulation? How do we approach this environment where we have these externalities created by technology?
Well, I think the solution to the problems of the internet are three or fourfold. I think the issue of regulation is important. Again, it may not be quite as popular in the US as it is in Europe, but we're beginning to see legislators confronting the problems. We're seeing it every day on the front of our newspapers with the issue of Uber. Should Uber be allowed to have their service in Spain or local markets? Most of you in Las Vegas will have noticed that there aren't Uber cars here because they're not allowed. So there is a role for legislators. There's a role for companies. In my book, I talk about the way in which companies, law enforcement agencies, credit card companies, ISPs, content companies work together to fight piracy. And I think we all need also to control ourselves. We all need to self-police. We know this as parents, as teachers, as employers, that the internet has become a kind of drug, especially for kids. And the way to manage it is to educate and to teach accountability. One of the problems with the internet is that it's legitimized a culture of rights rather than responsibilities. That's not only the problem of the internet, it's a broader cultural issue. And it's collapsed the idea of the consumer and the citizen. So when people go online, they tend to think of themselves as having these rights as consumers, but no responsibilities. What we need to reintroduce into digital society is the idea of the citizen and the idea of responsibility.
So, and how do we do that? How do we self-police? How do we self-regulate? What does that look like?
I don't really get into that in this book, but there are a number of books being written about this, which I cite. I mean, we all confront this issue on a daily basis. Do you have kids?
I do, yeah.
How old?
7, 9, and 11.
And what's your policy on the internet? What do you do you let them take their do they have iPhones? Do you let them take tablets into their rooms? Do you let them do anything they want?
Boy, so that's me policing, though. That's not them self-policing. How? I mean, is there a role for us to do we impose restrictions on one another, or what are the? It seems to me like with the introduction of technology, we see social norms start to change, right? And so, what do the social norms look like in an environment as we start to evolve through the evolution of the internet, as we start to look for these solutions?
Well, I think one social norm, for example, is to take accountability for anonymity. I wrote my first book, Call to the Amateur, which was argued that anonymity was really dangerous and was creating a lack of civility. My second book, Digital Vertigo, focused on the surveillance nature of this new digital world, and I recognize there's only one thing worse than anonymity, and that's the complete absence of anonymity, where we're being watched everywhere we go. I think when it comes to something like anonymity and chat networks, we need to take responsibility for our actions. It's all very well to go on new networks, gossip networks like Secret, and trash other people, but we have to understand the consequences. Sometimes it's hard to explain consequences to 14-year-old girls who are bullying another girl, but if that bullying results not only in social ostracism, but suicide, and there have been many cases, I cite some of them in my book, then just as we force kids to be accountable in the physical world, they need to also be accountable in the digital world.
So what are the big takeaways you want readers to walk away with?
Well, I think the biggest takeaway is to recognize that the promise of the internet has not been fulfilled. We were told by the founders of the internet in the 60s, I mean, it's hard to concretely identify a date, but let's say 1969 when the first computer-to-computer communication took place. So it's almost been around now for 50 years, or certainly close to 50 years. The web now just celebrated its 25th anniversary. We were promised at the time that it would generate more opportunity, more equality, more jobs, better economic environment. And the point of this book is to suggest that's not the case, that the internet in many ways is the cause and in sometimes the consequences of our deeper social, cultural, and above all else, economic problems. So the goal of this book is to start a conversation about these issues. This is not the first book to be written about this subject. Many other people are writing books on a similar theme, Jaron Lanier, Nick Carr, Sherry Turkle. But I kind of encapsulate, hopefully, in the book everything to give the reader a broad experience And it's designed to get people to seriously think about these issues. I mean, I got one review from Publishers Weekly saying anyone with an email account should read this. The zeitgeist is changing. When I wrote this book in when I wrote Cult of the Amateur in 2007, I was almost universally vilified as an elitist, out of touch. I didn't know anything about technology, blah, blah, blah. Today, what worries me about this book is a lot of people are coming up to me and saying, I absolutely agree with everything you say, which is even more of an insult to me than saying I disagree with everything you say. So the zeitgeist has shifted. These issues are becoming more and more popular. More and more people are coming round, people on both the left in particular or on the right, to recognizing that the internet hasn't delivered. So we need to have that serious conversation before things get even worse.
So you feel like the internet will move more towards the background, where we've been pulling it increasingly towards the foreground and trying to integrate it into our daily experiences, that we'll start to compartmentalize it, that we'll start to push it out and use it just in certain ways? Or do you feel like it does, if something isn't done, engulf every aspect of our daily life?
It's becoming ubiquitous. So it will become increasingly seamless. I mean, one of the big themes in this show and many shows of its type is the Internet of Things. So I was a judge at the AT&T Hackathon on Sunday, and we're going to have chips in everything. Chips in clothing, chips in furniture, chips in books, chips in food, chips in everything, so that everything we will do will be connected. Not only will we have an internet of people, I just did the thing with Hans Vestberg of Ericsson. By 2025, everyone on the planet practically will be networked on intelligent devices. By 2020, Ericsson expect there to be 50 billion intelligent devices. So when we talk about the internet, maybe even, I'm not crazy about the word the internet, because to me it sounds kind of old-fashioned. I actually prefer the word the network. That was another idea of calling the book The Network. But we live in what Ericsson calls the network society. So everything will be networked. This already is. I mean, half of you are probably tweeting or recording or checking your email. And so when we talk about seamlessness, I think that's the next real revolution. And so the internet will be like oxygen. It will be ubiquitous. And we won't even need a word for it. Just like we don't really need a word for mobile anymore. You don't really hear mobile or wireless, because everything's mobile, everything's wireless.
The new book, Andrew, The Internet is Not the Answer. Andrew sent me an early copy, and I was able to read it in advance. It is a great look into some of the things that we don't always think about